June 18, 1942. A Prague church. 7 men are trapped in a crypt beneath as water rises around them. Above, 700 SS troops surround the church, their boots echoing on the stone floor. Tear gas fills the air. The men have fought for 6 hours. Their ammunition is nearly gone. Escape is impossible. In the darkness, 4 men raise their pistols to their heads. This is the story of why they chose death over surrender. But to understand their final choice, we must first understand who they were trying to kill. Reinhard Heydrich, the third most powerful Nazi in Europe, Hitler's potential successor, and architect of the final solution. In just 8 months as Reich Protector of Czechoslovakia, he had ordered the execution of over 400 Czechs and the deportation of thousands more to concentration camps. They called him the Butcher of Prague. And 7 men were sent to kill him. With Czech suffering reaching unbearable levels, a desperate plan was formed thousands of miles away in London. The Czechoslovak government in exile, led by President Edvard Beneš, approved Operation Anthropoid in October 1941. Their goal? Demonstrate that Czechoslovakia had not been defeated, disrupt Nazi administration and inspire resistance. But they knew the price would be terrible. Hitler had already made his policy clear. For every German killed, 100 Czechs would be executed. To carry out this dangerous mission, 2 men were selected from among 2,000 Czechoslovak soldiers in exile. Jozef Gabčík, a 29-year-old Slovak carpenter, and Jan Kubiš, a 26-year-old Czech locksmith. Both were members of the Sokol Gymnastics organization, which fostered national pride and physical fitness among Czechs and Slovaks. Neither was expected to return. What made Gabčík and Kubiš particularly suited for this mission was their connection to Britain. While stationed at Chumley Castle for training, they met 2 British sisters, Lorna and Edna Ellison, then just teenagers. The paratroopers were charmed by these very polite and kind soldiers who had a twinkle in their eyes. Jan Kubiš even gave Edna Ellison a ring, possibly an engagement symbol. These relationships underscored the profound personal sacrifices made. As John Martin, author of A History on Operation Anthropoid, noted, the men left some of their possessions in the Ellisons' family home, and crucially, when they thought they might face death they included Lorna and Edna in their wills. On December 28, 1941, shortly before their departure, both Gabčík and Kubiš made out their last wills, a solemn acknowledgement of the immense risks they were undertaking. The contents of these wills, prioritizing their English sweethearts alongside their families, reveal a deep personal attachment and a clear-eyed understanding of their probable fate. After months of intensive training with the British Special Operations Executive in Scotland, the moment came for the paratroopers to begin their mission. December 28 to 29, 1941, they were dropped from a Handley Page Halifax bomber near Hnevezdy in occupied Czechoslovakia. The landing was difficult due to the weather and navigation errors. Some paratroopers were injured during the jump. The initial weeks were spent hiding and establishing safe houses. Making contact with the Czech resistance network was perilous. Any wrong encounter could mean betrayal and death. But by January 1942, they had established contact and began the painstaking work of surveillance on Heydrich's routines. For 5 months they watched. They documented his daily commute from Panensk-Brezhny Castle to Prague Castle. They noted his preference for traveling with minimal security. They found the perfect spot, a sharp curve in the road at Holsovis-Libin, where his Mercedes would have to slow down. May 26, 1942, final preparations were made. Gabčík was assigned to attack with a Sten Mk2 submachine gun, a British weapon known for its ease of production but notorious for jamming. Kubiš was assigned a backup role with a modified No. 73 anti-tank grenade, often nicknamed the Thermos, due to its resemblance to a vacuum flask. Jozef Valsik was assigned as a lookout with a signal to indicate Heydrich's approach. The final briefing was held at a safe house in Prague. The weather was clear, the temperature mild. Time of day, morning rush hour, 10:30 a.m. selected. What they knew, Heydrich's schedule, his car, green Mercedes convertible, route, and that he often traveled with minimal security. What they expected, a quick ambush and escape through pre-planned routes. Final orders, eliminate the target at all costs. If capture is imminent, take your own life rather than reveal the resistance network. May 27, 1942, 10:28 a.m. Valsik signaled Heydrich's approach with a mirror. 10:30 a.m. Heydrich's green Mercedes slowed for the sharp curve. Gabčík stepped from cover and raised his Sten Mk2 submachine gun. He pulled the trigger, click, nothing. The gun had jammed, which was later attributed to a broken firing pin. In that moment of frozen time, Heydrich, instead of ordering his driver to accelerate and escape, stood up in the car and drew his pistol. This fatal decision, born of arrogance rather than tactical sense, made him a stationary target. Kubiš, seeing Gabčík's weapon fail, immediately threw his modified No. 73 anti-tank grenade at the car. The grenade exploded against the right rear wheel, sending fragments through the car. Both Heydrich and his driver were wounded by shrapnel. Gabčík and Kubiš fled in opposite directions as planned. Despite the failure of the primary weapon, the attack had succeeded. Heydrich was seriously wounded but not killed immediately. His driver, SS Oberscharfer Johannes Klein, managed to drive him to Bulovka Hospital despite his own wounds. Both assassins escaped immediate pursuit despite being fired upon by Heydrich and Klein. Gabčík escaped via tram while Kubiš, wounded in the thigh by shrapnel, fled through a different route. A massive manhunt was launched immediately. Curfews were imposed, transportation was restricted, and rewards were offered for information leading to capture. In the hospital, the initial surgery on Heydrich appeared successful. Fragments were removed from his abdomen. Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Karl Gebhardt, was flown in to consult. But by June 2, Heydrich's condition deteriorated rapidly due to infection. June 3, 1942, his condition was critical. Septicemia had developed. June 4, 1942, 4:30 a.m. Reinhard Heydrich died from septicemia caused by grenade fragments. The Butcher of Prague was dead. The mission had succeeded, but the paratroopers' ordeal was far from over. They had confirmation of Heydrich's death through resistance contacts in the hospital, but they also knew what would come next. Hitler was enraged by the news. His immediate reaction was to demand ruthless reprisals, setting the stage for the horrific atrocities that followed. The scale of retaliation was beyond anything the Czechoslovak government in exile had anticipated. June 9, 1942, Lidice village was destroyed in retaliation. All 173 men and boys over age 15 were executed. Women were sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. Children were gassed at the Chelmno extermination camp or Germanized, by being adopted by German families. June 10, 1942, Lizaki village met the same fate. While the Nazis unleashed terror on Czech civilians, the paratroopers remained hidden, their fate hanging by a thread. They moved between safe houses in Prague, constantly aware that discovery meant certain death. The resistance network that supported them risked everything. Families like the Moravecs, who initially hid Gabčík and Kubiš, faced unimaginable danger. Elena Kasparova, whose father Bohdan Kasper had been executed by the Nazis in September 1941 for his resistance activities, later recounted a nighttime Gestapo search of their apartment while Adolf Opaka, another paratrooper, was hiding. The Germans searched everywhere, she remembered. One soldier was heading towards a couch. Mum pushed the chair and it fell on its back. The German came over and helped her put it back up. If it hadn't been for that and he had made it to the couch, he would certainly have been attracted by the two cushions that were propped up against the back of the couch. June 16, 1942, the paratroopers' luck ran out. Karel Kurda, a fellow paratrooper from a different group, Silver A, was captured by the Gestapo. Facing torture and the threat to his family, he decided to betray his comrades for a reward of 1 million Reichsmarks and assurances of safety for his relatives. His information gave the Gestapo the crucial intelligence they needed: the location of the paratroopers in the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius. June 17, 1942, the SS received this information. Bishop Gorazd of Prague, who had provided sanctuary to the paratroopers, was arrested along with other church helpers. The paratroopers' final stand was about to begin. They were now trapped, with escape impossible and capture certain. They knew what awaited them if captured: torture, interrogation, and eventual execution after revealing information that would lead to the deaths of countless resistance members and their helpers. June 18, 1942, 4:15 a.m. SS troops surrounded the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius. Over 700 men against 7 paratroopers. The initial assault was repelled by the paratroopers who had taken up defensive positions within the church nave and the choir loft. Adolf Opaka, Jan Kubiš, and Josef Bublik were in the choir loft, while Josef Gabčík, Josef Valsik, Jaroslav Svark, and Jan Ruby were in the crypt below. The SS, unable to quickly subdue the small group, resorted to increasingly desperate measures. They used tear gas in an attempt to force the paratroopers out, but when that failed, they called in the Prague Fire Brigade to pump water into the crypt, intending to flood the men out or drown them. As the water level began to rise and the tear gas intensified, the paratroopers faced their final, impossible choice. 7:30 a.m., the SS breached the main church. In the ensuing battle in the nave, Apaka and Bublik were killed. 8 a.m., Kubiš, severely wounded during the initial assault, died from his injuries. The paratroopers' ammunition was nearly exhausted. The SS discovered the entrance to the crypt. 9 a.m., water and tear gas were pumped into the narrow space. The 4 remaining paratroopers, Gabčík, Valsik, Svark and Ruby, stood back-to-back in the cramped space as the water rose around them. With their last round spent and escape impossible, they faced a choice between surrender and torture or suicide. Their decision was unanimous and final. They would not betray their comrades or the wider resistance network. Their last reported words echoing from the crypt were, "Jim Sisai, Nikdi si nevzdame slicite? Nikdi. We are Czechs. We will never surrender, did you hear that? Never." 10:30 a.m., the 4 remaining paratroopers committed suicide rather than surrender. Gabčík, Valsik, Svark, and Ruby used their last bullets on themselves rather than be captured. The SS discovered their bodies in the flooded crypt. The church siege had lasted 6 hours. 7 men had held off 700 SS troops for that long, inflicting 14 wounded in the process. The paratroopers' final act of self-determination, even in defeat, denied the Nazis the satisfaction of capture, interrogation, and a public propaganda victory. Bishop Gorazd and other church helpers were arrested and later executed. The Nazis celebrated their elimination of the terrorists, but the paratroopers' final choice of suicide over capture had a profound psychological impact on those who witnessed it or participated in the operation. An SS officer later reported, "They fought like cornered animals. Even when all hope was lost, they chose death over capture." The paratroopers were dead, but the Nazi reprisals were far from over. In total, over 5,000 Czechs were executed in reprisals between June and October 1942. The destruction of Lidice and Lízáky was just the beginning. Entire families were arrested. Anyone suspected of having connections to the resistance was detained. The Nazis were determined to make an example that would crush any remaining spirit of resistance. The effectiveness of this brutal policy was mixed. While organized resistance was effectively dismantled for the remainder of the war, the paratroopers' sacrifice became a powerful symbol of Czech defiance. In the long term, their actions demonstrated that even the highest-ranking Nazis were vulnerable, and that Czechoslovakia had not passively accepted occupation. The psychological impact of their courage resonated far beyond their immediate circumstances. Today, the story of Operation Anthropoid continues to raise profound moral questions. Was killing one Nazi worth 5,000 innocent lives? Historians still debate this question. Some argue that Heydrich's death disrupted Nazi operations and demonstrated that resistance was possible, making the sacrifice worthwhile. Others contend that the operation was a strategic failure that accomplished little beyond provoking massive reprisals and ending organized Czech resistance. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Operation Anthropoid was the only successful government-organized assassination of a top-ranking Nazi official during World War II. It showed that even the most protected Nazi leaders could be reached, but the cost was devastating. The paratroopers themselves understood this potential cost. In their final letters, they wrote of their love for their country and their acceptance of the probable consequences. They made their choice with full knowledge of what might follow. The technical aspects of Operation Anthropoid reveal much about the precariousness of the mission. Gabčík Sten Mk2 submachine gun, a weapon notorious for jamming, failed at the critical moment. The Sten was a product of wartime exigency, designed for rapid, cheap production rather than refined reliability. Its simplicity was its defining characteristic. It consisted of only 47 stamped steel parts and could be broken down into a few major components for easy concealment. But this simplicity came at a price: reliability. The Sten, particularly the early models, gained a notorious reputation for jamming, especially if not meticulously maintained. The primary culprit for malfunctions was often the magazine itself. The Sten used a double-stack, single-feed magazine design, which was prone to feed lip damage and misfeeding if not handled with care or if overfilled. The fact that a weapon as notoriously unreliable as the Sten was chosen for such a high-stakes mission speaks volumes about the constraints under which the Special Operations Executive and the Czechoslovak government in exile were operating. If the Sten represents the problematic primary weapon, the British No. 73 anti-tank hand grenade, often nicknamed the Thermos, embodies the adaptive ingenuity and brutal effectiveness of the backup plan. Conceived in the dire circumstances following the Dunkirk evacuation, when Britain faced a critical shortage of effective anti-tank weapons, the number 73 was one of several expedient designs rushed into production. It was essentially a cylindrical container, approximately 11 inches in length and 3.5 inches in diameter, weighing 4.5 pounds when filled. It was packed with a substantial 3.5 pounds of explosive, capable of penetrating up to 2 inches of armor plate. For Operation Anthropoid, the grenades issued to Kubiš were specially modified. Accounts suggest they were lightened, possibly by removing part of the explosive filling or the casing, to make them easier to throw, though this would have come at a cost of some explosive power. The successful deployment of the number 73 grenade by Kubiš, under immense pressure and after the primary weapon had failed, is a testament to his training, composure, and the effectiveness of this expedient weapon when used correctly. The enemy perspective on Operation Anthropoid reveals a complex mix of shock, rage, and grim determination. For the Nazi leadership, and particularly for the security apparatus in Prague, the attack was not only a severe blow to their authority but a profound personal insult and a challenge to their perceived invincibility. Hitler himself was reportedly enraged by the news of the attack on his appointed Butcher of Prague. His immediate reaction was to demand ruthless reprisals, setting the stage for the horrific atrocities that followed. The intelligence picture available to the Nazi security forces initially was fragmented. While they knew an attack had occurred on Heydrich's convoy, the exact identity and whereabouts of the assailants were initially unclear. This led to a massive citywide manhunt, involving checkpoints, house-to-house searches, and the interrogation of known resistance sympathizers. The resources allocated to this operation were immense, reflecting the high priority placed on apprehending the assassins. For the individual SS soldiers or Gestapo officers involved in the siege, the experience was likely a complex mix of professional duty, frustration at the prolonged resistance, and a grim satisfaction in ultimately fulfilling their orders. The official assessment of the operation from the Nazi perspective would have been one of ultimate success in eliminating the assassins and crushing the immediate threat, despite the high-profile loss of Heydrich himself. However, the sheer ferocity of the paratroopers' last stand, even if unspoken, must have had an impact on those who witnessed it or participated in it. Facing an enemy who chooses certain death by suicide over capture is a psychologically challenging experience, as it denies the victor the traditional spoils of war, such as prisoners for interrogation or public display of power. The paratroopers' final act of self-determination, even in defeat, would have been an unsettling display of an indomitable will, something that the Nazi ideology, which prized a twisted form of heroic sacrifice for its own cause but despised it in its enemies, would have found difficult to process. The civilian experience of Operation Anthropoid and its aftermath was one of terror, suffering, and loss. For most Czechs, the assassination of Heydrich initially brought a moment of hope, followed quickly by dread as the scale of Nazi reprisals became clear. The destruction of Lidice and Lízáky sent shockwaves through the population. These were not just statistics. They were communities where people had lived, loved, and died. The stories of those who suffered in these reprisals are as crucial to understanding the full human cost of Operation Anthropoid as the stories of the paratroopers themselves. The memory of these events has been preserved through testimonies, memorials, and annual commemorations. The National Memorial to the Heroes of the Heydrich Terror in Prague, located in the crypt where the paratroopers made their final stand, draws around 60,000 visitors annually. The rebuilt village of Lidice, with its memorial and museum, stands as a testament to both the destruction and the resilience of the Czech people. The long-term impact of Operation Anthropoid extended beyond the immediate aftermath. Strategically, Heydrich's death created a power vacuum in the Nazi administration of Czechoslovakia. No replacement proved as effective in maintaining the brutal efficiency that Heydrich had established. Psychologically, the operation demonstrated that even the highest-ranking Nazis were vulnerable, inspiring resistance movements throughout occupied Europe. However, the effectiveness of Czech resistance was crippled for the remainder of the war due to the devastating reprisals and the elimination of the resistance network. In the post-war years, Operation Anthropoid became a symbol of Czech courage and sacrifice. The story has been told in numerous books, including Laurent Binet's H.H. and Callum MacDonald's Killing Heydrich, and in films like Anthropoid, 2016, and The Man with the Iron Heart, 2017. These retellings, while varying in historical accuracy and focus, consistently highlight the extraordinary personal bravery of the paratroopers and the profound moral dilemmas involved. The technical performance of the weapons used in Operation Anthropoid offers a compelling case study in the complex interplay between technology, training, human psychology, and the sheer unpredictability of combat. The Sten's failure at the precise moment of engagement was catastrophic, but not an entirely unexpected one, given its characteristics. This single mechanical failure had immediate and profound consequences. It transformed what was intended as a devastating close-range burst of submachine gun fire into a moment of high vulnerability for the assassins. Heydrich's reaction, instead of ordering his driver to accelerate and escape, was to stop the car and draw his own pistol, a decision that, while ultimately fatal for him, momentarily placed the initiative back in the hands of the Nazis. The failure of the Sten highlights the immense psychological pressure on operatives whose lives, and the success of a critical mission, depend on the flawless functioning of their equipment. Gabčík's training would have kicked in at that moment, allowing him to quickly diagnose the jam and transition to his sidearm, but the critical element of surprise and overwhelming firepower was lost. The contrasting fortunes of these two weapons in the space of a few seconds shaped the historical narrative of Operation Anthropoid. The Sten's failure nearly led to the immediate collapse of the assassination attempt, while the No. 73's success ensured its ultimate, if delayed, achievement. This dynamic illustrates that in clandestine warfare, the best weapon is not always the most technologically advanced or reliable, but rather the one most suited to the specific tactical need and, crucially, the one that functions when called upon. The human element, the operator's training, nerve, and ability to adapt, remains the critical variable. The jamming of the Sten and the successful throw of the No. 73 also had profound psychological impacts. For Gabčík and Kubiš, the former must have induced a moment of sheer terror and frustration, quickly replaced by the need to react, while the latter would have brought a surge of desperate hope. For Heydrich and his driver, the initial relief at the Sten's jam would have turned to horror as the grenade exploded. The story of Operation Anthropoid challenges us to consider the true cost of fighting evil. The paratroopers' courage is undeniable. Their sacrifice is awe-inspiring. But the civilian cost is staggering. The moral complexity of this operation forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about resistance, terrorism, and collateral damage. Modern parallels to resistance movements and contemporary debates about the morality of targeted killings make this story deeply relevant today. How do we fight evil when the price is measured in innocent lives? When is resistance justified, and when does it become morally indefensible? These questions have no easy answers. The story of Operation Anthropoid doesn't provide them. Instead, it presents us with a powerful example of human courage in the face of overwhelming evil, and asks us to weigh the consequences. It reminds us that history is made not just by grand strategies and famous leaders, but by individuals who make impossible choices under unimaginable pressure. The legacy of Operation Anthropoid is complex and enduring. The National Memorial to the Heroes of the Heydrich Terror in Prague preserves the memory of the paratroopers' sacrifice. The rebuilt village of WWII stands as both a memorial to those who died and a symbol of resilience. Annual commemorations at the church and assassination site ensure that the story is not forgotten. The bullet-scarred crypt where the paratroopers made their final stand remains a powerful testament to their courage. Visitors leave flowers and notes, one simple message in English reading, "Your courage is beyond what I can imagine," reflecting the enduring power of their sacrifice. The story of Operation Anthropoid continues to be told and retold, each generation finding new meaning in the complex moral questions it raises. It stands as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, individuals can make choices that echo through history. The story of Operation Anthropoid leaves us with difficult questions that continue to resonate today. Was killing one Nazi worth 5,000 innocent lives? Historians still debate this question. Some argue that Heydrich's death disrupted Nazi operations and demonstrated that resistance was possible, making the sacrifice worthwhile. Others contend that the operation was a strategic failure that accomplished little beyond provoking massive reprisals. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. What cannot be debated is the extraordinary courage of the 7 paratroopers who chose death over surrender in a flooded Prague crypt. Today, the National Memorial to the Heroes of the Heydrich Terror in Prague preserves their memory. The rebuilt village of WWII stands as a testament to both destruction and resilience. Annual commemorations ensure that their sacrifice is not forgotten. The bullet-scarred crypt where they made their final stand remains a powerful testament to their courage. Their sacrifice asks us a question that echoes through time. When fighting evil, what price is too high? If this story haunted you like it haunts historians, there are more untold WW2 stories on this channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss them.